All right, let's go ahead and get started, guys. Sorry I didn't announce this one sooner. I wasn't really sure whether or not I was going to be streaming, but thought it'd be fun to play. I haven't played the Battle of Antietam on here yet for either side. And I thought about playing as the Union, but as I look at the numbers and you figure it's basically a 2-to-1 advantage for the Union, I thought it would be more of a challenge to play as the Confederacy. And I'm going to leave McClellan on historic AI, so it'll be interesting to see how he acts in this game. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not going to give any bonuses to the Union because he's already got a 2-to-1 advantage in manpower. He doesn't need any other bonuses beyond that. Robert, hello. Hank Hill, how's it going? Yeah, Imperial Europe, they reached out to me. It was really cool. It was actually not long after I changed the name of my channel. And they basically said that they wanted to, it wasn't so much a collab as they wanted to just kind of do a shout out for me and direct people to my channel from his. And I thought that was very kind and gracious of him to do that. And I responded, but I haven't heard anything back since. So maybe I just need to reach out to them again. They probably have been pretty busy. He's got that name trademarked now, and it's kind of a big business for him now. So the person I talked to actually wasn't the history guy. It was a person who works for him. So McClellan will run away. We'll see. At the very least, he may not commit all of his troops. Let's hope that's the case. Because if he commits all his troops, I may be in trouble outnumbered 2-to-1. Davey, how's it going? Kabhas, hello. So there's a new update, a big update coming for the game. I think the latest post I saw said it's about 3 days away. And it should make the 1861 campaign fairly playable. They're addressing the two main issues that I'm having right now are both basically the same. One is that the enemy, no matter which side I'm playing, never seems to really recruit too much in the way of new troops, and they're supposed to be addressing that. The other one is that it seems like when an army loses a battle, it goes into this kind of attrition death spiral where men just start disappearing like crazy. And the army runs out of men real quick. So they're supposed to be addressing both of those things for the campaign. Yeah, Morbus, that would be very cool to see something like a mix of this and War of Rights. Final Eclipse, hello. So we're going to take on the role of the Confederacy at Antietam, which is going to be really interesting because I've never played as Antietam. It's Confederacy at Antietam or the Union on this game. It's showing that he's got 112,000, but we know he doesn't have that many. That's just an estimate, and then as you encounter the enemy, you get a more accurate picture. So I'm looking just to see where everybody is. We've got Anderson's division down here. Good evening. Hey, nobody. How's it going? JD, good to see you. Hank Hill, you know what? Honestly, when I first started playing this, I was pretty terrible too, and I'm still not that great, but I've got a lot of hours into it now. Super basic news. I have played this on my laptop, which is pretty low end, with the graphics turned down, and it seems to do okay. So I would say it probably can run on a lower end computer, but I wouldn't say for sure. Yeah, Mal, that's kind of what I've been experiencing too, especially the 1861 campaign, but it's happening in 1862 as well. All right, so let's take Anderson's division and figure out where we want to go with them. I'm looking down here. Here's the lower bridge. This is the one that you kind of call Burnside Bridge, and there's tombs. Those are the Georgians who historically held off basically an entire division until what ended up doing in the Confederates holding at Burnside Bridge was two things. They ran out of ammunition, but also the Union finally got around on this side, and they were able to cross at another spot. Niall, how's it going? Duroff, hello. So I'm going to try to just hold all the crossing points as best I can. We've got Pendleton's artillery reserve here, and I think it would be really nice to get them up on top of this hill. Antietam is one of those battlefields that you really have to visit to appreciate the terrain and understand kind of how it's all laid out. So let's see, who can we get where? We got to start covering all these crossings as best we can. I'm going to get Walker up here. I think we probably need to move up a little closer than that. What time is it? It's 4:30 in the morning. we'll start moving them, and then we'll kind of get them from there. Jesse, how's it going? Good to see you. Thank you for your support again, sir. Jesse's one of our newest patrons. Jones's division. Let's get him. Actually, I want to start from north to south because I think the initial attack's going to come from the north, at least if it behaves historically. Here's Stonewall Jackson with the left wing of the army. So we'll get Jones with his division. Let's see. That's a lot of artillery there. Should you summon him? Hey, nobody? Yeah, go ahead and see if you can do it. Bryce, yeah, see, 1861, and I did the same thing. I was able to, on the Union side, I didn't show it on the campaign, but I was able to pretty much build an army and march right into Richmond without very much trouble. I've been doing all I can to try and make the campaign a little more of a challenge. All right, so we're going to come up here to Miller's Cornfield and hold that with a whole division if we can. So Jones will move over there. Here's Hood's division. Hood's division was historically up here around the cornfield, but I'm actually going to move them a little further over here to the right. And then over here you have the sunken lane down in this area right there. And this was kind of the main line where the majority of the early fighting took place. Hey, Bill from Massachusetts. What part of Massachusetts are you in? I was just there a couple of months ago. I've had 2 trips to Massachusetts now. And Logan, they have said that the idea is that Grand Tactician will be not just a Civil War game, that eventually there will be other Grand Tactician games. That's why this one's called Grand Tactician the Civil War, because the idea is that it will be kind of a series. So yeah, I would think Napoleonic would be an excellent choice. I thought Napoleonic War would have been a perfect choice for a sequel to Ultimate General. Yeah, 7 Years' War was the first game that kind of was with this style a while back. Woods Hole. Okay, so that's isn't Woods Hole where it was the Woods Hole Oceanic Institute or whatever that sponsored when Bob Ballard found the Titanic back in '85. I think that's where I know that name from. Both times I was there, I flew into Boston. Once I spoke in Hamilton at the high school in Hamilton. So let's go ahead and bring this division up here, and we'll tweak all of this once we get moving. Basically, once we see what the enemy's going to do. And I'm going to basically bring Anderson right now with orders just to move up south of town, and then once we see what the enemy's doing, we'll shift accordingly. I think we've got Pendleton's artillery already moving. So we'll start going now. Grand Tactician, the Opium War. There you go. Benjamin Ben Ari. Are you from Israel? I could be completely misjudging this, but your name sounds like you might be Israeli, so that's kind of awesome. The Alvin is a couple blocks away from my house. Okay, very cool. I'm old enough to remember when that happened. I was 8 years old when they found the Titanic, and it was one of my earliest historical fascinations was the Titanic, and probably because of those events. With them finding it, I was really, really into that as a kid. Bryce, the biggest thing that you would notice about Massachusetts compared to Texas is that how small it is. I'm from Ohio, and I thought, and I found Massachusetts to be small. Like you could get from one end of it to the other pretty fast. Yeah, especially compared to Texas. I mean, for Ohio, it takes about 5 hours to get from one corner of Ohio to the other. Okay, very cool, Benjamin. Well, I'm glad you're here. It's one of my dream trips is to be able to visit Israel someday. So let's kind of zoom out and see. Yeah, so far this is the only place we're actually spotting the Yankees. And we've got the Iron Brigade up here coming down from the north. heavy action up here in the cornfield. I got to visit there a while back. I think I posted the videos originally on this channel, and they'll eventually go over to the new Vlogging Through History channel. Yeah, it's amazing, Bryce, how our interest in history can sometimes be colored by events on TV. You know, so for me, the Titanic was first, and then Civil War came soon after. And the reason I really got into the Civil War, it was three things, and they were all television things that came out when I was a kid or a teenager. There was Gore Vidal's Lincoln, which was a miniseries starring Sam Waterston as Lincoln that came out. I don't know, I had to have been maybe 10 years old when that came out. And that really got me into the Civil War. North and South, the miniseries came out, and then Ken Burns' Civil War documentary. Those things really got me into the Civil War early. Justin, the 64th Ohio, very cool. Where was the 64th Ohio, the historic one, from? I'm not familiar with that regiment. Even though I'm from Ohio, I'm not familiar with that one. There's so many regiments from Ohio. Imperial Europe, Bismarck's another good one. I remember as a kid watching the movie Sink the Bismarck, and I was really fascinated by that. Benjamin, that'd be awesome. I would love to have the opportunity to visit Israel someday and take a tour. Yeah, Mao Gettysburg's fantastic. Battle Cry of Freedom, that's a good song. I like that one. So it's early in the morning, it's 4:48. Doesn't look like the Union's moving yet. And we've got everybody moving here. We've got D.H. Hill's division moving in over toward the Sunken Lane. Where's Lawton going? Lawton's going in right here near the cornfield. Jackson's going to go to his left. We're going to move Hood in just to Lawton's right. I gotta shift Hood just a little bit. No, not just the artillery. Nelson told you to say this. Rule Britannia, yes. Rule Britannia. Britannia rule the waves. Britons never shall be slaves. If you're new to the channel, there he is. Nelson's here. Nelson's our mascot. John Hoffman, where was the reenactment you went to? Oh, Benjamin, I love Killer Angels. That's the book. If you guys aren't familiar, that's the book that the movie Gettysburg is based off of. Bill, I haven't read anything about an option to fight naval battles. I don't think that's on their front burner. It doesn't mean it couldn't happen at some point, but I don't believe that's a priority for them. In Mansfield, okay, so that's central Ohio, up north of Columbus. It'd be west. To me, it's western Ohio, but it's not. It's really in the central part of the state. But me being 8 miles from the PA border, everything's west of me, really. James, very cool. It's a tough one. This is a tough battle as the Confederates. This is interesting. So we have a Chaim von Steinwehr, because von Steinwehr was the name of a Union brigade commander during the war. So what's Jones doing? Jones is, I'm going to get him into a single line formation. He's in double line right now. So the Union's still not moving. I'm still going pretty slow here, just so I can manage all of this. So here we've got some units getting into position now. I've got Jones back here. I really should move him up. I'm going to put a bunch on Burnside Bridge, but I'm actually going to move a few of them down to cover these other spots. If they added bots to War of Rights, I agree. I think that would be good, and you could command them. Yeah, like commanding your own little squad or something. That would be very cool. Cancer. Bots are a cancer on MP games. That's true, but sometimes so are people. I have Verdun, and I haven't played it for a while. I also have Tannenberg. And Nelson, my wife was practicing her risk skills in the car on the way to church this morning. She played a game against all expert PC, and she won pretty handily. All right, let's get some more artillery up here. All right, we're getting into a fairly strong position up here. I got to be careful he doesn't try to outflank me at Nicodemus Hill. All right, let's put Evans down here. So if you visit the battlefield, you'll see there's a huge monument right up here on this hill above where Toombs's brigade was to William McKinley, the 25th president of the United States, because William McKinley was, I believe, he was a quartermaster sergeant at the time with the 23rd Ohio. The 23rd Ohio actually was commanded by Rutherford B. Hayes, who was also a future president, but I think he was wounded at South Mountain a few days before Antietam. And so the 23rd Ohio was stationed up here after they had taken the lower bridge, after the Union had taken it. And so they built a monument to McKinley after he was assassinated there. Sorry, I'm just getting caught up on the chat here. Mao, you can play a full game of Risk against all computer opponents on the way to church. It's about a 50-minute drive to our church, actually. But my wife didn't take nearly that long to play it, because when you're playing the AI, it can go pretty fast. I got to watch this down here. But I think these guys are coming in there. I think we can probably speed this up to 2 times, at least for a little while. Imperial Europe, honestly, that's the thing people don't realize, is that the majority of the battles where people died in the Civil War, I mean, first of all, the majority of deaths were not from battles at all, but from disease. But a lot of people died in battles that nobody's ever heard of. My 4th grade grandfather, Samuel Hughes, who I talk about often, was with the 20th Ohio. And they were at Fort Donelson, they were at Shiloh, they were in the Vicksburg campaign, they were at Lookout Mountain or Kennesaw Mountain. But the battle that his unit suffered the majority of their casualties was the Battle of Raymond, which most people have never heard of. And it was a battle during the Vicksburg campaign. The Risk League, yeah, I sent out, Nelson, I just sent out a couple messages to folks just before I started this stream, trying to reach out and trying to line some of those games up as soon as possible. So hopefully we'll get that figured out soon. Justin, very cool. Part of Gods and Generals as extras. Hank Hill, no U.S. presidents were in the Confederacy. But let's see. We did have several former U.S. presidents that were part of the Confederacy. John Tyler, who was a former U.S. president, actually was elected to the Confederate Congress. Never served. He died in 1862. He's buried in Richmond. John C. Breckinridge was the vice president of the United States right up until a month before the war started, and he ended up a general during the war. Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy, had been Secretary of War and also the commandant of West Point Military Academy. They're already crossing the middle bridge. Not even daylight yet. We've got artillery right up there. Walker's battery. We've got some more artillery on the way. These guys are in a rough spot with this building in the way. Let's move these guys up just a hair. Mr. Alekra, the action has just begun, so... First Potomac Maryland Home Brigade. Okay, yeah. They were at Gettysburg. But yeah, they made, not a lot of those units didn't necessarily fight in all of those. All right, let's see what's going on. Not a lot right now. We've still got these units coming in. He's starting to move on the cornfield now. We're ready for him. So there's Isaac Trimble's brigade under Walker. Here's Harry Hayes. That's the Louisiana Tigers, I think. All right, we've got Jeb Stewart's cavalry over here. I think we're pretty solid at the moment. Let me get D.H. Hill's division in a single line. You can hear the artillery firing. Oh man, these guys already got a unit across the center bridge. I'm pretty lightly defended here at the center. Had to whittle himself a new foot? That's crazy. Justin, that's awesome. Vincent's brigade. Strong Vincent's buried in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and a half away from me. Justice for Sad Alfred, a historical game for under $20. I'd have to look and see what's going for that much right now. Grizzly old dude, thank you. Yes, it has been significantly patched several times. There's one coming in 3 days, which is going to really be a big deal. It's the patch that I've personally been waiting for because the issues I've been experiencing most should be fixed by the patch. Issues of attrition, issues of the AI not recruiting properly. So I think those are going to help the game a lot. If you go to the discussion board on Steam for the game, you'll see they are constantly updating what the next patch is going to be and how long it's going to be. The developers have been fantastic about responding to the issues that people are having and addressing them quickly. And they've been putting out significant patches, usually less than a week apart. What is going on here? We don't have anybody guarding this bridge, and we've got to deal with that. Let me pause real quick. I'm going to shift D.H. Hill, at least a couple of brigades over here. We'll send Rhodes and Ripley to start. Now, you know what? Let's send the whole division. And then we can always shift over here if we need to. Random British guy, hello. Yeah, Hendricks, I might pull Stewart's cavalry back. I'm just worried about leaving Nicodemus Hill uncovered. To my knowledge, I didn't really have any family significantly engaged at the Battle of Antietam. Is this artillery firing? They are not. It would be nice if they did so. Somebody just mentioned about the artillery not firing. Wonder if I turn off fire at will and then turn it back on again. It may be just because of how these other guys are lined up. That they have a unit in front of them, and so that's why they're not firing. Because this other battery's firing. So what if we pull Warren's brigade back? I've been listening to Ulysses Grant's memoirs, which have been fantastic. Really fascinating to listen to. Yeah, Bryce, I agree. The music is fantastic. I have it turned off, as I always do when I'm streaming or making videos. Did his brigade just... He just sent a whole brigade at my battery. So it's only 6 in the morning. Let's see how the casualties are going so far. Pretty even, which is not necessarily good news for me. He's got twice as many guns. I mean, I don't think he actually has 102,000 men. Yeah, Mr. Allegra, that's possible. The house or the trees might be messing with line of sight. It looks like they might be firing now. Let's look and see. Yeah, maybe not. I bet it is the house. What if we... Are these guys firing here? They're not firing either. I'm going to pull them back. And I'm going to pull this one back. And let's see if that gets them to be able to fire. Yeah, my fourth great grandfather that was at Vicksburg, their major action was at Raymond. They were at Champion Hill. I actually had 3 ancestors on the Union side at Vicksburg in the Vicksburg campaign. I just found out, and this is really, really cool. I found out there was a battle, a small skirmish in eastern Kentucky where the 22nd Kentucky Mounted Infantry of the Union and the 5th Kentucky Mounted Infantry of the Confederates were engaged in hand-to-hand combat, and I had 2 ancestors in each of those units, 2 on the 5th on the Confederate and 2 in the 22nd on the Union, fighting hand-to-hand against each other. And I just thought that was really fascinating and just sums up the war in Kentucky perfectly. So the Middle Bridge is the main place we're kind of dealing with action right now. Looks like we broke one of his brigades. Who is that? That's the 1st Brigade. And it looks like now we're driving off this unit. Hopefully. Maybe not. He sent... Oh, that's 2 more brigades that are hitting my artillery. And Walker's brigade has a level up that we can employ here. Goodman, thank you. I appreciate that. You know what? Here's what's cool about John Mosby, and this is one of the things I've been learning during Grant's. The movement's slow, Cartoon Rush, probably because I have it on real time and it makes it look like it's moving slow, just because there's so much to manage right now. I'll probably speed it up as we get further along. John Mosby very nearly captured Grant not long after he became the Commander-in-Chief of Union Forces. Grant was on a train. I think he was going back to Washington from the front lines. And I guess Mosby missed the train by like a matter of minutes. Grant and Mosby actually became good friends after the war, which is interesting because, you know, Mosby was one of the most hated figures for by the Union on the Confederate side because of his tactics, because of the way he did things, because of his, you know, kind of the style of his fighting and the nature of his unit. But Grant actually highly respected him, and he said when he met him, he wasn't at all like he thought he would be. And they actually, Mosby ended up working for the government, working for Grant's administration after the war. So did a lot of people. I think Longstreet became a ambassador of some kind at one point. Of course, Longstreet was hated in the South because he became a Republican after the war. Mr. Alacra, were they Mormons? Cursing both sides. John Gordon was a beast. He was severely wounded at the Sunken Road up here. Shot in the face. I think he was shot several times, but I know he was shot in the face. And if you look at pictures of him later in the war, he always turned his profile in the other direction. So you didn't necessarily see that wound. The sun's coming up. Oh, we got some Zouaves here. Who is that? What brigade is that? 2nd Division, 1st Corps, Army of the Potomac, 1st Brigade. Wow, they've taken 358 casualties already. Let's look at the casualty. Alright, so they've taken quite a few. We're getting more accurate numbers now. I'm curious to see where the casualties are for the Union so far. 9th Corps. It's cool that you have all this information. I really just, one of the things I love about this is the amount of detail you're able to get. Hello. Thank you for subbing. And I'm not going to try to pronounce your name because I'm assuming it's Polish, and I know I will not pronounce it properly. I apologize for that. But the name of this game is Grand Tactician, the Civil War. It's right there in the title. Yep. One of the original families to follow old Brigham Young. I for a number of years, was on staff at a church here. I live in Austintown, Ohio, a church here that's almost 200 years old. And one of the original elders in the church was a man named Sidney Rigdon, who actually was supposed to follow Joseph Smith as the head of the Mormon church, and he was bypassed in favor of Brigham Young. But he originally had been one of the elders of this church here in Austintown, and then he met up with the Mormons in Kirtland, Ohio, up near Cleveland, which was one of their stops as they headed further and further west. Mahoney also had a good career after the war, correct? Russell Copeland, hello. Yeah, what's this over here? That's General McLaws just taking his good old sweet time and getting up there to where his division is. I need to get at least one unit. Let me back up a little bit. Let's get Kershaw's little brigade to cover this crossing. Antietam is one of my favorite battlefields to visit because probably more than any other battlefield I've been to, my visit to the battlefield really enhanced my understanding of the battle because the terrain is so unique there. It's these really rolling hills when you get on the west side of the Antietam Creek on the Confederate side. On the Union side, it's kind of flatter. Looks like we've kind of thrown them off here for now. And when you see the hill above Burnside Bridge, this lower bridge, you really get an understanding of why the Confederates were so easily able to defend it with just a few, just 1,200 men or so in one brigade against an entire division. It's just such a commanding view of the crossing of that bridge. Wayne County, Ohio. I'm trying to think. I know that's out west in the western part of the state, I think, but Terrence, how's it going? Good to see you. Not a lot happening where historically the most furious fighting was happening at this point in the battle. Pretty cool uniforms right here on these guys. Who's this? Stark's Brigade. Let's look at their battle flags. They've got the... I'm so impressed. Those are actually proper Army of Northern Virginia battle flags. They're square. That's how they should look. The rectangular version would be the Army of Tennessee's battle flag. That's the one that most people call the Confederate flag. So well done developers on getting the right battle flag for this time. And if you start a campaign, depending on when you start it, the Confederacy has different flags. This battery has just taken a beating from these brigades. Mark McDaniel. Very cool. What a legacy. I love discovering those connections because it makes it more personal, Like to go to the Shiloh battlefield and I actually got to walk in the field that my fourth great grandfather crossed with the 20th Ohio in Logan's division when they led off the counterattack on April 7th. Like standing there in the very field where that happened was such a cool experience. Going to Gettysburg and standing on Cemetery Ridge next to the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry Monument, knowing that's where my fourth great grandfather Daniel Survey stood and watched the 57th Pennsylvania, a unit that his son was a sergeant in, watching the 57th Pennsylvania just being slaughtered in the peach orchard. And knowing his son was in that unit, you can see the peach orchard clear as day from where he was standing. To know that he had to stand there and watch his son's unit just suffer 50% casualties and wonder if his son survived, which he did, just brought it to life for me in a way I had not experienced before. I'm going to hold Anderson's division back, at least for now. Goodman, there is something in the update, in the new patch about the naval combat, but it has nothing to do. I don't think they're going to make naval combat something you can control. I think it's always going to be auto-resolve. Mark, I am actually the pastor of my church. I spent 14 years in full-time youth ministry as well as a worship leader. But for the past 4, I've been a solo pastor at a small church. Cool story about where our church is. Our church is 160 years old. It's in Salineville, Ohio, which is in Columbiana County, just a few miles from West Virginia. And Salineville was the location of the last battle that was fought between John Hunt Morgan's raiders and the Union who was pursuing them before he fled Salineville and actually surrendered just a few miles north. We drive right past the surrender site every day, or every Sunday when we go to church. Your great-grandfather lived in Elyria. Elyria is a little over an hour away from me. That's up near Cleveland. Bryce, yes, I've also visited those mass burial pits at Shiloh. Shiloh's, boy, one of my favorite battlefields I've ever been to. All right, we got some fighting going on here near the cornfield. All right, we've got an upgrade available for Lawton's brigade. Let's give them Iron Discipline. My church is actually, I don't like to talk too much about religion on here. I'm not trying to avoid it, but I don't want to, turn anybody off to the channel who might not believe the same way I do. Because you're all welcome. We all have history in common. But we're actually a non-denominational Christian church, part of a collection of non-denominational Christian churches and Churches of Christ. That's what I grew up with. And, Mark, very cool. Thank you for your service, sir. I appreciate that. I actually looked into being a chaplain at one time. My wife was not in favor of it too much, but I wish I could have had the opportunity to do that. Mr. Laker, Israel Putnam. He was a tough dude, man. He was a good general. And yeah, what is Lawton doing? Does this mean they're facing the right way? Yeah, Bunker Hill was cool. I'm disappointed that basically, there's not much left of the Bunker Hill battlefield because the city of Boston has kind of grown up around that. But it's still cool to visit there. There's a lot of so much history in Boston and just in Massachusetts in general. Boy, he's really not attacking too much anywhere else. Of course, it's only 8 o'clock in the morning, so, we got a long way to go. Yeah, skirmishers. I'm not going to use them right now, right here. Actually, maybe we'll have Jones put his skirmishers out. Maybe Hood as well. The skirmishers are very effective on this game. I have not made a tutorial. That might not be a bad thing to do. Sin City, you're not the first person to recommend that to me. So that might not be a bad idea. Is my corps commander chilling on the front lines? No, but my division commander is, and he's been wounded because of it. Alexander Lawton. I don't know why he was out there. The corps commanders are Jackson, who's the left wing commander, and Longstreet, who was on the right wing. Yeah, Mark, when this game is a finished product, it will be not only the best Civil War game ever made, but I think it'll be one of the best war games, period, ever made. He's coming at me now. So one of the youngest men, I use that term loosely, one of the youngest soldiers ever to receive the Medal of Honor was over in this area, and he was the bugler for a Union battery that was right in this area here near the cornfield. And the battery had suffered so many casualties. In fact, I made a video about this. I think it's probably still on this channel. I haven't moved it over yet. The battery had suffered so many casualties that the bugler started getting into the fight and helped fire the guns and received the Medal of Honor for his actions. Oh boy. Trimble's brigade needs to get turned around here. Alright, we're going to need some help. Whose brigade here is this? This is Stark's brigade. Let's bring him over. and start firing into the flank of these guys. Oh, he's coming at me big time in the cornfield now. Carson, I have not been to the Chickamauga battlefield, and I need to. Because as I mentioned earlier, I had a couple of ancestors with the 5th Kentucky Mounted Infantry, which was part of the Orphan Brigade. So they were at Chickamauga and very heavily involved there. Sin City Titan, I will definitely look into doing a tutorial. Seems like there are some folks who could use that. Yeah, this might be the time to bring Stewart in. I really like him to be in a single line, but let's go ahead and bring him up over here. Let's see where else they might be moving. Looks like they're starting to shift more units over here toward the center. Nothing much happened at Burnside Bridge yet. This is the place I got to worry about right now. Alright, who do we have a feud with here? Grigsby with the Stonewall Brigade. An elite unit. That's what that little flag, when they have 2 battle flags, that's because they're an elite unit. So, Walker's been wounded. Hit them firstest with the mostest, right, Will Simmons? I think that was attributed to Nathan Bedford Forrest. We should probably get... Alright, there we go. We drove off Magilton's unit. I'm going to go ahead and move Jones's entire division up if I can. So Ricketts tried to break us over here on our right. That didn't work out too well for him. Let's check on the casualty situation. Gotta go all the way back out to the top here. Alright, now we're looking good. Now we're looking real good. 1,662 versus 6,100. This was the bloodiest single day in American history in terms of the casualties, when you count both sides. Did the Union have any brigades like this? Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of them is right over here, the Iron Brigade. That was eventually the Iron Brigade. Let me see if I can find them, because they should be in here unless they pulled back already. They may have pulled back, but they were in this attack on the cornfield. The Iron Brigade was the 2nd, 6th, and 7th Wisconsin, the 19th Indiana, and then eventually they added the 24th Michigan, who fought with the brigade for the first time at Gettysburg. But yeah, that would definitely be one. There's the Irish Brigade. There was the Excelsior Brigade, which was formed by Dan Sickles, which was a well-known one. But I would say the Iron Brigade and the Irish Brigade would be 2 of the most well-known kind of elite units on the Union side, at least in the East. You know zero about Civil War battles? Well, the main thing to understand, and the main reason that the casualties in Civil War battles were so severe was that the weapons had not, or the weapons were ahead of the tactics. The tactics largely going into the Civil War, at least at the beginning, were based on a Napoleonic era when most people were using muskets that were smoothbores and weren't very accurate. Zach Mills, how's it going? And so you could be 200 yards away and firing and have very little to show for it in terms of accuracy. But especially with the invention of the mini ball, which was for rifles, rifled muskets and rifled guns, the accuracy became deadly. And so whereas you were using tactics that were based on very inaccurate weapons, you get into situations where you're firing at 100 yards away in a battle line and you were just decimating the enemy. So, you know, that's the one thing, is to understand, to use tactics that probably much more modeled the First World War. So cover, concealment, hugely important. keeping your artillery in a place where it can be of use, especially giving them a clear line of fire with the artillery. Like right here, I'm going to try to move these guys up. Actually, I may not want to because they're coming this way. So they can fire canister at close range. You can see this dashed line right here. That's the range in which, when they get inside of that range, they'll be able to fire canister. Looks like this brigade that was holding at the cornfield pretty much broke, but I think we're going to be okay. Let's see what's happening over here. Oh, we got a major problem on our hands here because they crossed up here, and I don't have another division there. I probably should have sent Anderson up there sooner. But we'll start to throw Anderson up that way. No, not at a time. I just want to move them right now. But we're going to have to shift some units up here. No, not the whole division. Oh, I think... Please don't tell me the whole division... Oh, they did. My whole division's moving. I didn't mean to do that. So what we'll do is instead we'll let the whole division move, but then we'll give orders to a couple of the brigades to stay put. Hank Hill, you're more interested in the politics. Honestly, the causes for the Civil War go all the way back to the Revolution. Things that weren't dealt with then, especially in the Constitutional Convention, the forming of the United States in the first place. They kicked the can down the road, and every subsequent generation did the same thing. They just kept kind of pushing the issue on to the next generation with compromise after compromise that temporarily, oh my gosh, no, I don't want Jackson's whole corps to move. That temporarily kind of appeased folks in the issue, but never really dealt with the issue itself. Let me pause for a second just so I can kind of catch up on things. Yeah, there were Union generals from the South, and there were Confederate generals from the North. John C. Pemberton, the Confederate general who surrendered Vicksburg to Grant, was from Pennsylvania. So it did happen. Yeah, George Thomas was from Virginia. So there's examples like that. William Tecumseh Sherman, he was from Ohio, but he was in Louisiana. He was the president of what became Louisiana State University at the start of the war. Was Antietam D.H. Hill's last fight with the Army of Northern Virginia? I don't think so. During the Gettysburg campaign, he was basically on detached duty defending Richmond. But I think D.H. Hill fought with them later in the war, didn't he? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am. Maybe that was the last battle. This is just a historic battle. This isn't part of the campaign. Right now, I think there are 10 of them. There's some of the major battles you can fight: Gettysburg, Antietam, First Bull Run, Second Bull Run, Wilderness, Chickamauga. I don't think I'm missing any of the major battles. And then there's a few smaller ones too, like Perryville, Wilson's Creek. I think Bentonville is one as well. Mr. Electra, right? Like nobody's ever done that before. What an absolute mess we have right now over here. I'm trying to do this from an Army commander's perspective and not meddle in the single brigade commands, but I'm eventually going to have to at some point, I think. Look, now we've got Robert E. Lee over there across the bridge for some reason. We're sending Anderson's division. They're still moving to get up here. I may actually have to send them to Miller's Cornfield instead. To shore up my center there. Mark McDaniel, yeah, I would guess they will. I don't know that that's a priority for them, but I believe they will add some more of these scenarios. I haven't had a campaign crash for quite a while, Russell. At least for me personally. they fixed a lot of those issues. I haven't had crashes. My issues have nothing to do with stability in the game. They just have to do with the gameplay itself, in terms of the campaign needing some work. Let's see where we're at. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so 3-1 casualties. We're already at 9,000 casualties for the Union. I think that's pretty close to what they suffered in the battle as a whole. And they haven't even started attacking some of the other places yet. All right, let's unpause. What's the check mark? Oh, Mark McDaniel's thing? I'm actually not sure what that is. All right, so let's see. Boy, poor Hayes with the Louisiana Tigers. They're just getting hammered right now down here. Looks like this Union unit's charging into us. So let's bring Stewart in here. Oh, looks like they're driving off that battery. There's Fitz Lee. I'm actually going to give, if he doesn't already have it, I want to make sure Stewart's operating on, no, he is on initiative already. AI stance, attack. Yeah, the campaign AI is better than it was when the campaign started. I've noticed that the AI in the campaign, in battles in the campaign specifically, does much, much better when he's defending. When I actually tried to attack, I got my butt kicked pretty good the first time. But if you're defending and you force him to attack you, the AI tends to not do as well. And I'm told that the AI aggressiveness only has to do with the campaign map and not in the battles. I think I read that. Alright, I'm just checking to make sure that we don't have any other issues anywhere. Let's see what's happening here. Not entirely sure why this unit's not facing that way. There we go. Let's get Colquitt over here. All verified account by YouTube. Okay, very cool. Tabletop Wargaming. Yes, Bill Worrell. Huge fan. In fact, the next time I do a history vlog and I have my webcam on, you'll see some of my my Mexican soldiers behind me from my Antietam scenario that I made many years ago. And then I've got some World War II pieces as well, and I've got a ton of American Civil War ones. I used to go to the Cold Wars, which is a big wargaming convention in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I just haven't been able to for a long time, but I had so much fun with those. Yeah, really into it. Just haven't had the time. Do I follow Epic History on YouTube? I've seen a few of their videos. Some of my favorite ones on YouTube, obviously for naval warfare, Drachenfell's great. I love the oversimplified videos. I think they're a great way for people who maybe don't normally know a lot about history to learn about important events. I thought those are pretty cool. They just did one on the Russian Revolution, which I really enjoyed. I'm gonna have to shift roads over this way a little bit. If you'd hit that like button, guys, I would greatly appreciate that. Those kinds of things help tremendously. And I just want to give a shout out to all the patrons. Holy cow. Added like 30 new patrons last month, almost all of them probably because of this game, and I'm grateful. If you're new to the channel and you don't know me, just want to introduce myself real quick. My name's Chris. I live in Northeast Ohio. The Iron Brigade broke. Look at that. I live in Northeast Ohio, born and raised here, lifelong student of history. I majored in history in college, but I've never really done anything with that in terms of career. My main job right now, my day job, so to speak, is that I am a national speaker. I travel around the country and speak in schools for an organization called Rachel's Challenge. It was founded by the family of Rachel Joy Scott, who was killed at Columbine in 1999 in that school shooting there. I have a 15-year-old daughter that we named Rachel Joy in her honor. She's one of my heroes, has been since I was 21 years old when I first learned about Rachel's story. Named my daughter after her, not knowing that we'd ever actually get the chance to get to know Rachel Scott's family and that now I'd end up working for them. So we share Rachel Scott's story because Rachel was the kind of person who went out of her way to show kindness to kids who were being made fun of, kids who were picked on, who were abused, who just needed friends. And we share her story and the things that she did to make a difference in her school as a way of inspiring students to do the same thing. Because I am of the opinion that 90% of the world's problems would disappear overnight if we just learned how to treat each other better. So that's what I do for a living. I travel around the country and speak about kindness and compassion. And of course, like many people's jobs, my job doesn't exist right now. This time of year, I would not be making YouTube videos like this. Normally, on a Sunday afternoon in August or in September, I would be on a flight somewhere to the next school that I'm going to speak at on Monday. But there are no schools to speak at right now because even the schools that are in session aren't having assemblies. So right now, YouTube is my only source of income. And being a small channel, I don't make a lot. So the folks that are supporting through Patreon, you're my lifeline right now. You are helping me literally to put food on the table and to pay the bills. So thank you for that. And thank you to all of you who watch this, because every time you hit like on a video, every time you watch a video and let those ads run, every time you comment, you're helping my channel. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. But above all, I just love hanging out with you guys. I love talking about history and playing video games with a bunch of people who enjoy the same things I do. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of this community. Join us on Discord when this is over, because there's always a lot of there's a lot of goofy things going on there too. But we have a lot of fun talking about history, talking about games. All right, he doesn't look like he's making any moves down south just yet. Will, I agree. If we could learn to talk to each other, that would make a big difference too. If we could talk to each other without talking past each other, for sure. Oh, we got some fires going on here. Is that the Dunker Church on fire? Oh, not okay. Or is it? I think this might be the church over here. Yeah, I think this is the Dunker Church right there. Cliff, thank you. I appreciate that, sir. Hey, nobody. I forgot you were in Hungary. That's awesome. You know, my wife's family's from, her mom's side of the family's from Hungary. All right, we've got these guys trapped in a nice little pincer here. They're down in the middle of nowhere. History March, I've seen their stuff. It's very good. I'll have to check out Epic History TV's Napoleonic War series. I haven't seen that. Russell, absolutely. To talk to each other, to listen to each other would go a long, long way. All right, Hood. Let's start moving back in and reoccupying the cornfield. Looks like attacks are coming over in the center now. Oh yeah, Dunker Church down here. Makes it more holy. The reason that I was looking at that is because if my memory serves from the battlefield, I don't remember Miller's Cornfield being that far north of Dunker Church. I remember it being more directly east, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought it kind of went Dunker Church, Miller's Cornfield, Sunken Lane, all in one place, but maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly. I think we're good down at Burnside Bridge. Let's check the center here. This is one of those opportunities that McClellan had to really put a hurting on Lee. He had such a massive numerical advantage at this battle, and he just would not use it. Yeah, let's take a look at casualties. The effectiveness of artillery and cannon in the Civil War, Taekwondo. There's such a variety of cannon. Let me upgrade Ripley's brigade here real quick. Look at that, 4,400 for me, 14,000 for the Union. Still, I don't think that's accurate, that number. I don't think he's got that many, but we'll see. So you had a variety of cannon. The most common artillery piece that was used during the war was the 12-pounder Napoleon, which was that was a smoothbore cannon, so much more effective at close range. Justice for Sad Alfred, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Much more effective at close range, especially with the use of canister. But you had the 3-pound ordnance, which was a fantastic rifle that had really strong, long range. You know, some of these battles, you had 300-400 artillery pieces on one side. And artillery played a huge role. There was a battle during the 7 Days campaign. I think it was it Malvern Hill? It was either Gainesmill or Malvern Hill. I want to say it was Malvern Hill, where basically something like half the casualties on one side were caused by artillery. Beautiful sunflower. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so artillery played a significant role. Played a significant role in the siege of Vicksburg. The big siege guns that they used at Vicksburg, the Union did, they were basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Naval guns that they hauled off the boats because they didn't have any big siege guns that they had brought with them for the most part. All right, we're still working on pushing back through here. Anderson's division's just now getting into the fight. And we're going to just let them kind of push their way all the way through up to here. But I'm going to hold the guns right there. About to hit me hard on the right. Yeah, he's loading up over here at Burnside Bridge. He's getting across up there at the center bridge. Let's see what's happening here. Is my artillery not in action here? Don't believe it is. I'm going to move these guys down into these woods. See if that'll help with this artillery firing. Yeah, the rifled artillery is best for for counter battery fire, for example, if you want to try and silence the enemy, because the rifled artillery was more accurate, especially at longer range. But the smoothbores were absolutely devastating at close range. You see that at Gettysburg, for example. Who do we got here? I need to bring these guys around if I can. Get in here, close range, and take him on. Some of these battlefields, and I want to visit Chickamauga someday, because I know Chickamauga is the prime example of a battlefield where the woods were everything. But Shiloh's like that too. So much of Shiloh is woods, and then there's occasional open clearing of fields in different places. Yeah, Jack Nichols, I learned this recently. The advance button is quicker because when you just give a standard order, like if you just click and drag for an order, you have to wait for an orderly to go to issue that order. But if you hit the advance button or retreat or fall back, any of those, so I'll show you, for example, right here. Right here, if you hit one of these buttons like advance or charge, which I actually should probably charge there, they use the bugle call. If they're inside of this bugle call radius, that's why it's an almost instantaneous reaction by the unit, because they get those bugle calls and they move right away. Looks like, I think we've pretty well finish things off on the left for now. So let's take a look here where we're at. We may actually be able to shift Anderson now. I tell you, John Hoffman, you're talking about artillery. My daughter and I were at the first Bull Run battlefield, and it was on July 21st, so it was, or we might have been there on the 22nd. It was around the anniversary of the battle, and they did a demonstration using blanks of firing an artillery piece. It is so much louder than you realize. That was one piece, and they said they weren't even using a full charge. Oh my goodness, and we were a good 100 feet away from it, and it was deafening. I can imagine what hundreds of those artillery pieces going off for an hour or more in close proximity in large numbers, what that must have sounded like. Just incredible. So I feel like we're doing okay. JJ Lou, thank you for that. Yes, I do remember you. That's okay that you haven't been here. I'm glad to have you back. That was so cool that you did that. So JJ, during one of my Hearts of Iron 4 campaigns that I was doing, I think I was playing the Millennium Dawn mod, and he was doing up like a running kind of like history. Like he was writing it like it was a historical document about what had happened in the game. And it was really, really cool that he was doing that. The division commanders are having tea with Armistead at Dunker Church right now. Louis Armistead to me is one of the more fascinating figures of the war. I mentioned this the other day on one of my videos, I think. I just learned this. William Tecumseh Sherman's granddaughter married Louis Armistead's grandson. JJ, I appreciate that. I know you would. Millennium Dawn is America. Okay. I've always been fascinated by some of those familial ties. In fact, I did a video talking about the relationships between the American Revolution and the U.S. Civil War, the family relationships. And those extend in the other direction as well. Douglas MacArthur, the World War II general, he and his father both received the Medal of Honor. His father was a very young Wisconsin colonel named Arthur MacArthur. He was like 19 or 20 when he was a colonel in command of a regiment. And he received the Medal of Honor, I think, at Lookout Mountain. Either Lookout Mountain, Kennesaw Mountain, one of those battles outside of Chattanooga. Simon Bolivar Buckner, who was a Confederate general, his son was a lieutenant general in World War II, was the highest ranking American killed in World War II. He was killed at Okinawa. He was a lieutenant general. In fact, he was the highest ranking American general killed ever in American history. There have been a couple of other lieutenant generals as well. But nobody of a higher rank has been killed in battle than Simon Buckner Jr. You were in the Corps 105 rounds? Oh, yeah, I bet. My goodness. Thank you, Will, for your service, by the way. Tristis, I would say yes. I've read them personally in my own family accounts. I've read of hearing loss. I'm sure among the artillerymen there had to have been hearing loss in a lot of the pensions. One of my ancestors, one of my fourth great grandfathers, one I alluded to earlier, who's in the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry, his disabilities from the war actually go back to the 7 Days campaign when he served as an orderly sergeant for General McCall, who was a division commander. He was carrying his orders to his other commanders, and at one point he describes in his pension file how he was sent by General McCall to find General Reynolds, to deliver orders to him, and he had to go on such a hard ride that he ended up with heart problems for the rest of his life after that moment. and he actually suffered deafness, but I don't think it was. I don't think he mentioned it being because of artillery, though it certainly could have been. All right, we got to guard this crossing here. Which commanders do I think are the most underrated and overrated during the war? I'll tell you who I underrated until recently. Grant. I think for a long part of history, Grant was underrated as a general. I think too many people wanted to just call him a butcher who just used brute force and numbers to win. Grant did some incredibly brilliant things on the battlefield, things that his other commanders didn't think were possible. Sherman thought Grant was crazy for his Vicksburg ideas on how to do the Vicksburg campaign. Didn't think it was possible. Lincoln didn't think it was possible, what he ended up pulling off. So I think Grant gets underrated even though he won the war. Let's see, who else would I say? I'd say Jackson might be a little overrated, Stonewall Jackson. Plain man, a lot of people comment about the not enough soldiers, and there's actually an easy way you can change that. They're not meant to represent the number of soldiers. I think each one of these guys represents 40 or something like that, or I don't remember how many it is. But they're representing the amount of space that unit would have covered on the battlefield. But you can go easily into the files and edit the number of men that each unit shows, the number of sprites they have. I think Stonewall Jackson was overrated. He did some good things in the Valley, but he went from the Valley campaign to the 7 days and botched it pretty badly. Did I watch the Grant series? Yes, I did, Mark McDaniel. I was so excited they did that. I really wish they'd do a full-fledged mini series about him, like 10 parts or something, because unfortunately that History Channel series, while it was really good, they really kind of glossed over so many parts of Grant's story that I think really, like Mexico, they could have covered so more. Hendricks, I agree. I think Grant was a first-class human being. Forget what he was as a general. Grant was a really good dude. Like, he was the kind of person I would want for a best friend. A really good guy who had flaws like anybody, who made mistakes, who tended to easily trust people, and that repeatedly got him into trouble, even as president. But he was a good guy who really did treat people with so much respect and dignity. And honestly, people underestimate how much he did for former slaves. And I think if Grant had been president in 1865 when the war ended, instead of Johnson, I think the whole history of our country would have been different. I think, especially for African Americans, their lives for the last 150 years could have been so much different if Grant had been there. So I think, no, plain man, I think it's like 40 to 1. Yeah, Mr. Alekra, and I'll be honest, for a long time, that's what I thought of Grant. He threw his men to the grinder and just kept replacing them, and that's why he won. Grant had some good tactics as well. Do I like studying the naval battles in the Civil War? Not as much as a lot of people do. Most of my study of naval battles with the war has been in conjunction with the way they worked with the infantry. And that was another thing Grant did really well, by the way, was he understood kind of combined arms better than most. He and Andrew Foote had a fantastic relationship and worked well together and coordinated things well together. Do I think Gettysburg would have been different if Stonewall had been alive? Yeah, I absolutely do. I don't know if it would have turned the outcome of the war, but I definitely think Gettysburg would have been different. No, Bill, I don't. I don't know if you're being sarcastic or if that's generally what a lot of people think, but he absolutely. Grant, first of all, yes, he was an alcoholic. Zachary, how you doing? Grant was an alcoholic, but he was a binge alcoholic. He wasn't drunk that often, and he couldn't hold his liquor. So when he did drink, it was like one glass, and he was done. He didn't drink that often. He usually drank when he was bored and when his wife wasn't around. Those two things were usually a recipe for the disaster. There were a few times he got drunk during the war, but never really when anything major was going on. And he did a lot during his presidency. He fell victim to some really bad people in his cabinet, some really crooked people who took advantage of him. But he did a lot of great things. He established the Justice Department as a way to fight the Klan, and pretty much single-handedly took down the Klan in the South during Reconstruction. He was president when the 14th and 15th Amendments were passed, which gave citizenship and the right to vote to African-American men. Yeah, tactics, absolutely. The advance in weaponry was so much of why the tactics or the things were brutal. Yeah, Bryce, I agree. Yes, Grant was an alcoholic. There's no denying that, and I don't think anybody would deny it. He wasn't drunk all the time. He was drunk very rarely, especially once he left the Army in 1854. But he was also just an incredible soldier. It was the one thing he was good at. Grant would tell you if he were here and could talk about it himself, he would tell you he was basically good at two things. He was a good husband and father, and he was a good soldier. And that was about it, really. Do I have a subreddit? No, I do not. Yeah, Grant was a terrible politician. I would agree with that. Grant was gullible. He was easily taken advantage of by people because he thought, what's the word I'm looking for? I think he had a higher opinion of people than they deserved sometimes. He gave people too much credit, and they took advantage of him because of it. Hey, nobody, I hear you. I'm the same way. We'll have another Taskmaster challenge coming out on Tuesday. Grant loved his cigars, and it killed him. He died of throat cancer. Kelnan, you actually make a good point. My grandpa's brother, my great uncle, was in the Korean War on the front lines in the infantry, and he came back an alcoholic because of what he saw there. It changed him forever, and I don't think anybody in our family ever blamed him for that. I think we understood. My great grandfather was an alcoholic, took his own life because of his alcoholism. So I'm not making light of alcoholism in any way, shape, or form. I have an aunt and uncle who are alcoholics as well. And so I understand the damage that can do. Was Jackson an inspiration for German blitzkrieg tactics? I don't know that he was. I think that was going on for a long time before. Is that Oliver Howard being broken right there at the middle bridge? So it looks like we got a bunch of generals out here behind my lines, basically with artillery and nothing else. Let's go try to deal with some of these artillery units. Tactics, I would wait. There's a maybe a few more days. There's a big update coming out. I think it's about 3 days away. And it's supposed to really, I think it's going to make the game pretty playable. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think it'll be at a state where you can probably have an enjoyable experience. Did Grant have a signature tactic? I don't know that he did. Something else Grant was really good at, he understood logistics and supply lines better than most. Yeah, John Hoffman, you're absolutely right. I think one of the most heroic things Grant ever did was finish those memoirs. And the memoirs are great. I'm listening to them right now, and they're really good. It's cool to have his insight. Grant knew he was dying of cancer and just wrote 8, 10, 12 pages a day at a time when he said it was like drinking molten lead just to swallow a glass of water because his throat cancer hurt him so much. The man was in tremendous amounts of pain and did it for his family. He did it so they wouldn't be poor, because right before he found out he had cancer, he had been duped out of his entire life savings, he and his son, by a guy who basically was running a Ponzi scheme. Zachary, we'll get to it at some point. Mr. Lakera, Sherman's an interesting character too. I love that all these guys are fellow Ohioans of mine. Let's take a look and see what's happening, because it seems like the only part of the Union Army that's still intact is over on my right. I think we're going to have to shift some more over here. We've got 2 brigades covering where he's about to cross. My favorite quote of Sherman's is the one where he talked about Grant. He said, Grant stood by me when I was crazy. I stood by him when he was drunk, and now we stand by each other always. Mr. Lakera, you're right. While the Civil War was going on, I think Ken Burns alludes to that. There's a war going on in China that kills millions at the same time that the U.S. Civil War was going on. Gordon Gecko, isn't that the name of the character from what's that financial movie? The one with Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas. Tactics, I haven't read that one. Colville, yeah. You talking about the commander of the 1st Minnesota. Hanson, it is new. I mean, they've poured their development into other aspects of the game, not the graphics, and I'm okay with that. Honestly, the graphics are fine with me the way they are. It really doesn't. It's not a big deal to me. I will take this game over the graphics of a Total War game any day. The Grant series, I know it's on Hulu. That's where I've watched it. It's fantastic. You could probably just pay for it. I mean, it's worth paying for to watch. What your picture? Oh, is that the 1st Minnesota, Zachary? Yeah, John, you're right. He was a humble guy. I honestly, I sound like a broken record when I say this, but I love everything about Grant. And a year ago, I wouldn't have said that. It was when I read Ron Chernow's biography of Grant, it was like my whole world changed. Like I had such a different view of Grant as a man and as a general after that. I highly recommend Chernow's biography. I'm actually also doing a book now on the Vicksburg campaign. Speaking of Sherman, I mentioned earlier I had a couple of ancestors who were in the 22nd Kentucky, and they were a part of the battle at Chickasaw Bayou, sometimes called Chickasaw Bluffs, which was kind of a debacle and a bad battle for Sherman. And there's a picture of the 22nd Kentucky's battle flag after the battle where it's just in tatters, it's in shreds, to show you how vicious that battle was. Jackson didn't really have cavalry. They called his infantry foot cavalry at times because of the way that they moved, but Jackson never really was involved much with the cavalry. Wall Street, that's the one I'm thinking of, Bob. Thank you. So we've got a battery here. Oh, he's really loading up down here and trying to cross. We got Kershaw and Barksdale here. What are you doing, Barksdale? Get back down here. Kellnan, thank you. I appreciate that. Kellnan, I would, but be patient. I do recommend this game, but be patient. It's not a completed product. Far from it. It's not even, I played Ultimate General Civil War when it was an early release, and it was a more finished product. It just didn't have like the campaign all the way to the end. This is not a finished product. There's a lot of problems. The campaign is largely difficult to finish. For example, you struggle because the enemy doesn't always recruit. but it is more playable every day, and the developers are all over it. They're doing a great job at listening to people and working on the game and getting it more and more finished all the time. So I definitely do recommend it. Yeah, I wish Total War would do an American Civil War series. Do I think Hood gets too much flack over Nashville? I think Hood is another one of those guys. I think Hood is overrated as a general. People forget how young Hood was. No, I don't personally think he gets too much flack over Nashville, but I don't think Hood had any business in command of an army. You know, there are so many generals who were good at something, but then not good at another thing. For example, A.P. Hill, fantastic division commander. Richard Ewell, great division commander, not good corps commanders. Hood, great brigade commander, great division commander, not a good army commander. Joseph Johnston, I think, is a better general than he's given credit for. Yeah, John, waiting for the next patch might be a good thing, and that's about 3 days away. My favorite CSA general to learn about, definitely Stonewall Jackson. Not just because of his tactics, he's just a really interesting person. Early broke. Stonewall Jackson was a weird dude, man. I mean, he was a hypochondriac, deeply religious man. Of course, so a lot of generals were. Oliver Howard was a deeply religious man. They called him the Christian general, Oliver Howard. Oliver Howard, I think, is probably viewed harsher by history than he should be. And a reason why I can say that is because Howard had a really bad couple of months in 1863 between Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. Didn't perform well at either of those, and part of that was just he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with his men. But the reason I know that he was a good commander is because if you look at what he did after that, he was trusted. He was given really high responsibility by Grant and by Sherman. They trusted him. They put him in positions of authority and power, and I think he did fairly well with those things. And he also did some really good things after the war. Howard University, historically black university, named after Oliver Howard. There's a couple of World War II Pacific War games coming up. Was Grant religious? Yes, he was Methodist. I would say he was a Christian. Was he as outspoken about it as someone like Stonewall Jackson? No, not really. But I do believe he was a man of deep faith, yes. It's just not something he talked about openly very often. Chuck, what's going on up in the state up north that we don't mention here in Ohio? Very cool. I'm glad I hope you're enjoying the games. What are my thoughts on Braxton Bragg? He's an interesting fellow because I think Bragg was probably a better commander than people realize, but his men hated him so much that they were kind of glad to see him go. I think I think Bragg was a decent commander. As far as Confederate commanders in the West go, he was probably one of the better ones that they had. Task Force Admiral, that's probably the one that they were thinking of, yeah. I'm like half paying attention to this battle because I'm mostly paying attention to the chat right now, which tends to happen when I do this. And that's totally okay. We are going to be doing a War Thunder stream at 2 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday for those of you who are interested in such things. How long has this stream been going on? Oh, it's an hour and a half. Okay. Let's take a look at the casualties now. Oh, 25,000 for the Union. I feel like McClellan would have run back to Washington by now if that had happened at this battle. Nobody ever had a chance to end the war as early as McClellan did. He could have taken Richmond. I believe with all my heart he could have taken Richmond in the summer of 1862 if the man would have just moved. He just wouldn't do it. I'm a little nervous about this crossing down here. And Barksdale keeps pulling back. Am I going to play Burden of Command? Absolutely. And I love those guys at Burden of Command because they subscribe to this channel, and if you follow them on Twitter, they tag me in things regularly. So they follow this channel as well, and I'm excited about Burden of Command. If you like Band of Brothers, the series, I think you'll like Burden of Command. I'm pretty pumped about that one. If they put Sherman and Grant together in the East, I don't know if that would have been a good idea. Although I think Thomas probably could have done pretty well out west. They had some, I tell you, Grant and Sherman had some really good subordinate commanders out west. McPherson was a fantastic Army commander, Corps commander for a long time. My ancestor in the 20th Ohio served directly under McPherson. They had George Thomas, of course. Oliver Howard was out west. I'm thinking of who else was out west with them. Joe Hooker was under Sherman in the west. How deadly is artillery in this game? I think this game, probably better than many games, is pretty balanced with the artillery. It's not overpowered like it can sometimes be in games. So Barksdale's got the little symbol that looks like lungs or hands. It's actually it means there's a feud, which means he tends to take his own initiative, which is why every time I order him to move up, he keeps backing up, because he's got a feud with his higher ups and he just wants to do his own thing. You had a youth pastor directly related to McClellan. Very cool. Interesting. People forget how young a lot of these guys were. McClellan was in his 30s when the war started. Grant was in his 30s when the war started. Grant was one of the youngest presidents in history. He was like 47 when he was elected president. Or no, wait, let me think. He was born in 1822. Elected president in 68. I think he took office at 47. So he was probably 46 when he was elected. McPherson, yeah, McPherson was a great commander. Also the highest ranking Union officer to be killed during the war. He was the only Army commander on the Union side to be killed during the war. I'm gonna basically tell Jackson. Wait, I don't want Jackson's division. I want Jackson and his left wing. I'm gonna tell him to go on the offensive as a whole, to take some initiative. Yeah, I agreed. I think, and Anderson did end up a Corps commander later in the war. What did the Confederates do so badly in the West compared to the East? I think there were a couple of things that were working against the Confederates in the West. Number one, they didn't have the level of commanders at Army or Corps level that the East did. They didn't have Lee, Jackson, Longstreet. But that wasn't the only thing. It was the amount of ground they had to defend. You know, Lee basically had to defend this narrow strip of territory between Washington and Richmond. It made it much easier to fight a defensive battle or defensive campaign and throw back the Union. In the West, you had all this ground to cover. You had multiple armies. Remember, basically there's one army in the East, the Army of the Potomac. There are others at times, but that was the main army in the East. In the West, you had multiple Union armies. You had the Army of the Mississippi, the Army of the Ohio, the Army of the Cumberland, eventually the Army of the Tennessee. But at any given time, you basically had three complete main Union armies operating in Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, and that area. It was a lot of ground to cover for a Confederacy that was devoid of having enough men to begin with. You're 11 and you're a better general than McClellan. McClellan's downfall. There's a scene in the movie Gettysburg that I think illustrates the problem with the July 2nd assault. And he tells him, he says, to be a good officer, you have to love the army. To be a good soldier, you have to love the army. To be a good general, you have to be willing to order the death of the thing that you love. What he was telling Longstreet is, don't hold back. Throw everything you can at them so we can end this war. That was what McClellan wasn't willing to do. He loved the army and the army loved him, but because of that, he wasn't willing to take any great risks with his army. There were a lot of those issues with seniority that came into play. You're talking about Sedgwick and McPherson. Another example of that was in the East, and actually Grant addresses this in his memoirs. I just got to this point. One of the reasons why in the East, for example, at the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and that campaign, you had General Burnside in command of the 9th Corps, but the 9th Corps and Burnside was not technically attached to the Army of the Potomac, even though they basically fought with the Army of the Potomac in those campaigns, is because Burnside actually outranked Meade, and so Burnside couldn't be placed in a subordinate position to Meade in the Army because he outranked him. Because his, there's all these different ways the rank works. If you both had the exact same rank, it was whoever got promoted to it first, and then you had the general or the regular army rank versus the volunteer army rank and all that kind of stuff. Hey, Mark, thanks for stopping by. Glad you were a part of the chat today. All right, let's take a look at the casualties now. All right, still about the same, about 9,000 on my side. So mine are approaching what Lee lost in this battle. True. Remember, these are guys that before the war were captains and majors. Very few of them. Albert Sidney Johnston was one of the few people who had actually been a general before the war. There weren't too many of those. Lee was a colonel in command of a regiment, and he was one of the highest ranking ones. Grant's highest rank before the war was captain. Some of these guys, Custer, graduated from West Point after the war broke out. He was right out of West Point. He was a lieutenant when the war started. Ends up a brigadier general in command of a brigade and even a division at one point, I think. Nathan Bedford Forrest was a private when the war started. Mr. Lakera, yeah, that's interesting. You had a Confederate Army of the Potomac at the beginning of the war. You had a Union Army of Northeastern Virginia. Just one of those things. The names that we associate with those units weren't necessarily there at the beginning of the war. And a lot of these guys got their positions because of connections. Grant was one of them. Grant is a captain who resigned because of his drinking before the war. Runs into John Rawlins, a guy he had never met, who was kind of a politician. Rawlins is going to give a speech. He invites Grant. He says, hey, you're the only guy here in town, meaning Galena, Illinois, who's got any military experience. It'd be great if you came and showed your face at this speech I'm about to give to try and recruit volunteers. Grant goes to the speech, and he said he decided right then and there that he was never going back to being a clerk in his father's store. And he was initially, he helped raise a company of men there in Galena, and he was offered the role of captain, and he turned it down because he felt like he could probably get more. He ends up being promoted to colonel of, I think, the 21st Illinois. And then because he had a connection to this congressman named Elihu Washburn, between him and Rawlins, they basically got the governor of Illinois to recommend him to Lincoln. And I think it might have been, I'm trying to remember who specifically, I think there might have been a senator as well, but somebody recommended Grant to Lincoln as a brigadier general, and that's how he got his brigadier general's promotion and put in command of troops in Missouri. Ended up fighting at Belmont. He got across Burnside Bridge So let's bring some help over here. We're going to counterattack. Here's Toombs. 638 men. Actually, why don't we just bring Jones's entire division over here? Yeah, the political generals did hurt. Rawlins did become Grant's chief of staff, and Rawlins basically made it his mission in life to keep Grant away from alcohol. He was a good friend to Grant. Ended up on Grant's cabinet after the war. I think he was Secretary of War for Grant. Died of tuberculosis, but Grant trusted Rawlins implicitly. And Rawlins was one of those people who Grant put his trust in that deserved it. Rawlins was a good man. He was a good friend to Grant. Take care, Zachary. Yes, that same Rawlins, Mr. Alekra. Yeah, we're gonna finish this up here before too long. But again, yeah, we'll play this out, the rest of this battle. But I really appreciate all you guys being a part of this. We've been pretty consistently over 100 people this entire stream. And if you haven't already, if you would subscribe, I would love it. The Grant administration was corrupt, Hank, but Grant himself was not. I don't think he can directly be tied to pretty much any of the stuff that was going on. Every Grant needs a Watson, yeah. Is that cavalry running behind my... No, what that is actually a broken unit. A broken Union unit that just broke in that direction. They're still working on some of that. Some of the units breaking in the wrong place. Yeah, there's a subtle difference between what cavalry looks like on the map and what broken... Oh, John Bell Hood wounded. Severe wounds in combat. He was repeatedly wounded severely during the war. Lost the use of his arm at Gettysburg. Lost a leg. Was it at Nashville he lost a leg? It was later in the war. Yeah, the Augustus. That's his hardscrabble farm outside of St. Louis. Michael, yes, and Shelby Foote was a fantastic author. Yeah, Eli Parker was a good friend to Grant as well. Served him well. He was also from Galena, Illinois, I believe. Hey, Nelson, take care, man. Good to see you. Hood did have a rough time of it. After the war, most of his family died in a yellow fever epidemic. You know what's amazing is how many of these generals lost children during the war. Lost a leg at Chickamauga, that's what it was, okay. Lee had a daughter who died during the war. Longstreet lost children during the war. Sherman lost a son he never even met during the war, who's buried with him in St. Louis. Yeah, Sherman's buried in St. Louis. I've been there. Actually, he and Pope, I think, are buried in the same cemetery, along with Almira Hancock, Winfield Scott Hancock's wife. Do I personally have a favorite general? Grant on the Union side, I'm a big fan of. Chamberlain, I love Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain on the Union side. On the Confederate side, it's a little tougher. I've always been drawn to Armistead for some reason. Maybe it's just because of his story, I don't know. Beyond that, I'd have to think about that a little bit. Reynolds, I like Reynolds a lot on the Union side. Having the name Hood is rather troublesome, yes. Yeah, Longstreet. I'd like to read Longstreet's memoirs as well. Yeah, Longstreet was largely shunned by the Confederates because of his political stances after the war. Stephen, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're here. Had a marathon watching Gettysburg and Gods and Generals. I'll tell you this about Gods and Generals. I watched it again recently, actually right about the time this game came out. My memories of Gods and Generals until my recent watch of it, viewing of it, was that I loved the battle scenes, hated the civilian stuff. The dialogue for me, especially with the civilians in Fredericksburg, really just irritated the snot out of me. But I watched it again recently. I watched the director's cut, which is like 5 hours long. It has the Antietam scenes, for example. And it stood up a lot better for me than I remembered it. Foote's trilogy is like Homer's Odyssey. I agree. Shelby Foote's trilogy of the Civil War is fantastic. Longstreet was ahead of his time, definitely. Jesse's saying, watch my left flank. I better go check that out. Looks like he's counterattacking with whatever he's got left. I pretty much gave Jackson orders to kind of handle things himself, but, ooh, my center is kind of falling apart. I see what you're talking about here. Let's get Anderson out here. Looks like Manning broke here. So he still hit me pretty hard. See, the Union's got so many men at this battle that even after you've just really done a number on him, he keeps coming back at you, which McClellan wouldn't have done. I'm up to 10,000. He's at 27,000 losses now, which 10,000 to me is a big deal in this battle. Yeah, you're right. Longstreet was probably maybe a little too cautious at times. But they could have used that caution at Gettysburg. I will say this about Nathan Bedford Forrest, not to defend his actions with the Klan, which are actually absolutely disgusting and reprehensible, and what was happening in the South after the war is just horrifying if you study just how things were. Forrest, and I don't know a lot about Nathan Bedford Forrest. I'm not going to try and defend him, but I do think he backed off of some of that toward the end of his life. Doesn't justify at all some of what he did. But I think it's important for us to, when we're talking about military history, and talking about history in general, I get nervous when we start judging people from the past by our 21st century standards, and when we discredit the good that a person did because in some areas of their lives they might have been scumbags of human beings. So just like you have Grant, who I think was a first-class human being, was a great guy. Thomas Jefferson did great things, but was a pretty lousy human being. Benjamin Franklin was a pretty lousy human being. Doesn't mean that they didn't do great, important things. Both can be true at the same time. Martin Luther King Jr., great man, did great things. Had some areas of his life that made him a pretty lousy human being. It doesn't take away from the good that he did, but it needs to be understood that that's a part of who he was as well. Yeah, Hendricks, he did. I think he kind of backed off of his support for the KKK later in life. Forrest is complicated. Most people are complicated. And yes, he was the first Grand Wizard of the Klan. And the Klan was absolutely a terrorist organization in the South after the war who did horrible, horrible things. So he's making a major push on my center now. I'm going to actually tell McLaws. Actually, let's tell Longstreet with his entire right to get into a defensive position. Oh, absolutely, tactics. If McClellan had put the least bit of effort into it, he could have absolutely routed Lee at Antietam. He had the numbers, and he had broken through on all spots of the line eventually. Maybe not so much on the left where Jackson and Hood were, but especially in the center and the right of the Confederate line. Absolutely Hank Hill. Andrew Johnson probably more responsible. I would put the decision to make Andrew Johnson Lincoln's running mate in 1864 one of the top 5 worst decisions ever made in the history of the United States. It's that big a deal. It was one of the worst things that ever happened to the United States, was that Andrew Johnson became president in the aftermath of the Civil War. They put a Southern pro-slavery Democrat, a racist, a flaming huge racist, on the ticket, not knowing that right as the war ended, he would become president of the United States and have to deal with Reconstruction. Yeah, I am probably going to have to regroup. I think I'm okay on the right. It's the left that is the problem. I'm trying to get a hold of Jackson here. Here we go. Let's do this. Pull back what's left over here. Agree. Fer-de-Lance, Greg. Great potential. It's going to be fantastic when it's finished. Oh, Mr. Laker, I agree. We shouldn't absolve people of their checkered past and of the things they did. I just don't think that we should completely go all full cancel culture on people because of those aspects of who they were. Oh, what do I think some of the other worst failings of the U.S. were? Not dealing with slavery at the end of the Revolutionary War. They were so afraid of the country falling apart under the Articles of Confederation as they tried to put the Constitution together that they kicked the can down the road. Should have been dealt with then, absolutely. What else would I say? Austin, I really don't know. And there were European observers watching the war. But I couldn't tell you necessarily what they thought of it. If McClellan had won the election over Lincoln, that's a good question, because while the war wasn't over, the Confederacy was collapsing. Because by the time the election happened, Sherman had marched to the sea, or was nearly done doing so. Grant had surrounded Petersburg. It would have been... McClellan wasn't personally opposed to the war, even though the Democrats, their platform called to a negotiated settlement. McClellan personally didn't agree with that. I think he would have continued it for as long as he politically could. Tactics, take care, man. Thank you. All right, he's got 31,000 casualties now, but he still outnumbers me almost 3-1. That's just crazy. I'm actually going to be wrapping this up here in just a couple of minutes, even though it may not be completely resolved. Let's do this. I'm basically going to let the generals do their own thing, just so we can at least see how it ends up. He's pouring through my center, though. Yeah, I think Sherman taking Atlanta sealed the deal for Lincoln. Francisco, how's it going? I don't even remember who McClellan's running mate was. I'm going to have to look that up. Who was his running mate on the... Oh, it was Pendleton. George Pendleton. He was a senator from Ohio, actually. Actually, at the time, he was a congressman. Oh, Pendleton's in the movie Lincoln. He's one of the main characters on the Democrat side. He was McClellan's running mate. So the movie Lincoln takes place right after he had run as vice president. Let's just see how this plays out with them kind of running the show for themselves. I'm trying to remember who played Pendleton in the movie. I'm looking now. That's right, he was. So he's basically the opposition leader in Lincoln for the Democrats. That was McClellan's running mate. Bruce, hello, how you doing? And I haven't read Longstreet's book. I want to at some point, but that's interesting. I know he does spend time. Well, the way it was viewed in the South was that he threw Lee under the bus for Gettysburg. Shelby Foote did say that, Michael. You're right. I agree. There are, honestly, I think the only way the South ever could have won the war was with European intervention, and European intervention would never happen as long as they had slavery, especially once Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. I just don't think that the European powers would ever have come in on the side of a slaveholding South. So no, I really don't see a scenario in which the South could have won that war. Short of... There's actually some really good comparisons between the American Revolution and the Civil War. Same issues with the American Revolution, with manpower and finances and might on the British side during the American Revolution. The only difference, of course, being a 3,000 miles of ocean in between. But Washington knew he could never win the war on the battlefield by winning victories and conquering territory. It just wasn't how that war was going to work. To paraphrase what's said in the Hamilton musical, he needed to outrun the enemy until the British public turned against the war, and that's what happened. And I think that's what Lee should have done too. And I think he understood that. You needed to turn the American public so much against the war that they weren't willing to spend the cost in dollars or in lives to keep it going any longer. There's a line in the movie Gettysburg where Longstreet actually says, he says, sometimes I think we should have freed the slaves and then fired on Fort Sumter. And he's absolutely right. It wasn't feasible, obviously, but yeah, I don't see. Man, we're down to just 18,000 men. Looks like he's kind of giving up the fight in the South here, but he's pouring into the middle. Let's do this. Let's tell Longstreet to move up. I'm just kind of not really paying that much attention to it now because I got to wrap this up in a few minutes. Yeah, if Lee had joined the Union, if he had accepted, if Virginia had stayed in the Union, Lee would have probably commanded the Union Army during the war. I agree. Ashir, eventually they would have had to abolish slavery to be able to open trade and have relations with other nations. Who's this down here? Is that Hood's division? Or no? Yeah, maybe it is. It's APL's Light Division. Nice of you to join us, guys. Well, Lee wouldn't have fought Jackson in that case because they both would have stayed in the Union probably. Because they were both... Actually, Jackson was from West Virginia. Let's see what Longstreet does here. He's going to start moving. They're going to start pulling out from this position now. I'm just trying to get a quick resolve here and see what happens. Man, we're at Gettysburg level casualties now for barely 1 day of fighting. So we've got AP Hill's division moving in now. Man, he's just hammering these guys in town. Iron Rain, not a matter of not being able to trade. It would have been that nations probably would have put a lot of political pressure on them through trade to end slavery. The South would have had to have come up with some kind of like 20-year plan or something to end the war, or to end slavery. So a bunch of units just surrendered. Enemy brigades, interesting. They would have put economic pressure on the South to end slavery. This isn't even a battle line. Yeah, it is a brawl in the streets, you're right. And it doesn't appear to be going particularly well for the Union. Who just got wounded? McCrae. Let's see what the numbers look like now. He's down to 53,000 men now, but still, I've lost half my army. He's lost nearly half of his. Looks like the left... Oh, it's lost. The morale of our troops has cracked. So there's the end of that. Let's see how it ends up. If I had been playing this battle, like in making a video and not streaming, I would have been much more careful, attention to detail. But this is mostly just an opportunity for us to talk about the war. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We'll see the screen here in a minute. So make sure you subscribe. Join us over on Discord. Consider supporting through Patreon if you can. And we'll be back on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern with a War Thunder live stream. If you want to install the game and join us, you're welcome to. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, guys.